Hi everyone, welcome to day 5 of the Food Revolution Summit. I have a question for you today. Is there one meal that is a daily ritual for you? It's tasty, it comes together in minutes, it's very satisfying, it checks all the boxes. In fact, it's probably so easy for you to create that you can practically do it with your eyes closed. For me, it's today's recipe, the everyday lentil lunch. I'm Nicole D'Andrea Russert, Food Revolution Network's dietitian and recipe developer, and today we'll be demonstrating one of my go-to lunches that is so flexible and comes together in minutes. Lentils are one of my favorite legumes. I love to keep them on hand, ready to go so that I can easily create a meal quickly. I typically enjoy them with brown rice or black rice. We're using brown rice in today's recipe, but you can easily swap any whole grain you love in place of the brown rice. Today we are making the lentils and rice with mushrooms and bok choy, which tastes delicious with this, but you can also swap out those veggies with vegetables that you have on hand or fresh veggies from your own garden. So let's get started. As you can see, we have our mise en place ready to go. Everything is pre-measured and ready to add to your stovetop pan because, as I mentioned, this recipe comes together very quickly. So first we're going to heat our stovetop pan on medium-high heat before adding our whole spices. So we are going to add a teaspoon of whole cumin and a teaspoon of whole mustard seed. These are two of my favorite spices that really boost the flavor of just about any meal. And we add them before we add anything else because heating them helps to bring out their flavors and their natural oils. So we're just gonna heat them for a minute before we add our veggies. So we're going to add the bok choy first. Now I have separated the stems from the leaves of the bok choy because the leaves cook much more quickly. So we're gonna add that as a last step. The stems I've cut up similar to celery. So they're just sliced and they cook similar to celery. So we're gonna add them next so they can cook through along with the mushrooms. So one bunch of bok choy is going to give you about 1 to 1.5 cups of stems and 1 to 1.5 cups of bok choy leaves. Next, we are going to add the mushrooms. We have 2 cups of sliced mushrooms. You can use any mushrooms you love here. I'm using sliced cremini mushrooms, but you can use portobello, you can use button mushrooms. So any mushrooms go here. And you may notice that I haven't added any oil. You do not need oil to saute these vegetables. I always like to keep either water or vegetable broth by the stove top so that we can easily deglaze the pan whenever needed to prevent the vegetables from sticking. So I don't need it yet. We're just gonna stir these. They're still not sticking. The pan's nice and hot. I could smell the cumin and the mustard seed cooking. And then next, we haven't needed to add any vegetable broth or water, but we are gonna add vegetable broth as the next step. So we have 1/2 cup of vegetable broth that's on the ingredient list. We're just going to use 1/4 cup right now. So we're gonna add 1/4 cup of vegetable broth. You can hear those veggies cooking. And we're just gonna let the mushrooms and the bok choy cook for a couple of minutes. And as they cook, or after they cook and start to soften a bit, we are going to add the aromatics. So we have here 3 cloves of garlic that have been minced and 1 tablespoon of minced ginger. I've added them to the same mise en place dish because they are going in at the same time and it was just easier to add the same mise en place. So taking steps like that to simplify recipes is always recommended. And then we also have our dry spices. I've also added these to the same mise en place dish. So we've got 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin. So we started with whole seed cumin or whole cumin seed, and now we have ground cumin, adding even more cumin flavor, and 1 teaspoon of ground turmeric. We also have 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which is always optional in any recipe. Feel free to omit the salt if you're watching your sodium intake. And we have 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. So that's also optional. If you cannot tolerate ground black pepper, then of course you can omit it, but just know that it does help us absorb the active compounds in turmeric better. So when we pair turmeric and black pepper together, it's better for our health. Okay, so we're gonna add all of those beautiful spices and seasonings to the mushrooms and the bok choy and give it a little stir before we add the next stars of the show. I think every ingredient in this dish is a star, so we can't really label just one star of the show here. So the next stars of the show are going to be the lentils. So brown lentils, we have 2 cups of brown lentils. You can use green lentils as well. And they're cooked, they're already cooked. And then we also have cooked rice. So we've got 2 cups of brown rice. You could use black rice in place of brown rice, or you can use wild rice or red rice, any rice that you love, other than white rice. So white rice doesn't offer the same fiber and nutrition as brown, red, black, or wild. So choose whole grain rice, or as I mentioned before, you can choose any other whole grain that you love, like quinoa or farro. They would both be great in this dish. We're gonna give it a little stir, and we are going to add the remaining vegetable broth. So another 1/4 cup of vegetable broth. And we're going to cook this until that vegetable broth is completely absorbed, which will only take about a minute or 2. And we're almost done. As I mentioned, this recipe comes together very quickly, as you can see. Finally, we are going to stir in the bok choy leaves. And at this point, you can even turn the heat off because it's nice and hot, and the leaves just need a little bit of heat to become tender. So we're gonna stir them until tender. And then as the final step, we are going to add some lime juice. So this is just gonna brighten the dish a little bit, along with all of those beautiful spices and the lime and the turmeric and the cumin. This all comes together really well. So that is the last step. This dish came together in minutes, as you saw, and now it is time to divide it between your plates and add some garnish. So there you have it, the everyday lentil lunch. It's time to divide it between plates and add any garnishes that you love. I'm going to add a little bit of sliced green onion and cilantro. If you don't love cilantro, you can always add another herb of choice like parsley or basil. I'm going to add some cashews. You can add any nuts or any seeds to this, hemp seeds or sliced almonds. And if you like a little spice, crushed red pepper flakes taste really delicious on this. You can add a little sprinkle of crushed red pepper flakes, and then it's time for the taste test. I'm gonna get a little bit of everything here. Yum. It tastes just like the everyday lentil lunch that I know and love. I hope that you get a chance to try this dish this week so that you can feel nourished while you're watching the incredible summit speakers. Just to summarize, this dish is fantastic because it comes together in minutes, 10 to be exact. It is super satisfying because it's packed with fiber and plant-based protein. It is also filled with lots of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients from the vegetables and the lentils and the rice and all the spices that we used. And it is packed with flavor. I'm Nicole D'Andrea Russert, Food Revolution Network's dietitian and recipe developer, and tune in tomorrow where we will be making a creamy kale and pineapple smoothie.